All of us want to hold ourselves to a high standard of integrity and honesty, and to go the extra mile for people as much as we can. But what happens when we are stuck dealing with another person who is either straight up unethical with us or whose actions are only just technically acceptable, not against a rule or law, but right at the line and not as good as they should be? And no feedback is going to lead to any change. I'm talking particularly about business relationships where, in addition to being unpleasant, it might cost money that a provider with more integrity would not charge. Though you can think about whether what I'm about to say applies beyond a financial context. Whenever possible, we should avoid people who are known to do business this way, or to extricate ourselves once it becomes clear that this is the case. But that's not always possible, either because there is only one person or firm who does what we need, or because the financial or practical costs of canceling a contract are prohibitive. Left in such a situation, how far is it acceptable to sink from our own standards to set things right for ourselves, so long as we are not ourselves violating a basic ethical norm? This is exactly how I see the situation of Yaakov Avinu and his father-in-law Lavan, Jacob and Lavan, in Genesis chapter 30 in Parshat Vayetze. Lavan has taken advantage of Yaakov's labor for nearly 2 decades, changing the terms of his service and giving Yaakov the most unfavorable interpretation of their agreements. Yaakov finally tells Lavan he wishes to leave, and they negotiate an exit fee to be paid to Yaakov. Instead of asking for a certain number of sheep and goats, Yaakov proposes to tend part of Lavan's flock for one last period of time, and then collect the speckled and spotted animals among that part as his final payment. Lavan agrees to the terms as spelled out. Then Yaakov sets up a breeding system that dramatically increases the number of speckled and spotted animals within his assigned flock, far beyond the expected yield. When Lavan's sons become aware of what has happened, they see it as stealing on the part of Yaakov and communicate that to their father. What Yaakov has done here is to make a specific agreement and then get the most out of it. Presumably, Yaakov knew that he would be able to leave with a bigger payment than Lavan thought he would owe, but it's all within the letter of the agreement. Did Yaakov owe Lavan the kind of extra ahead of time transparency that Lavan had never given him? Lavan had not always lived by the letter of his own statements. Was it okay for Yaakov to make the most of his own, as long as he himself has not lied? In this kind of circumstance where Yaakov has been defrauded over many years, I see the Torah indicating it is permissible for him to try to make his situation better, so long as he does not engage in actual dishonesty. He has, after all, an obligation to his family and himself, and is not required to leave without the means to set up away from Lavan in some kind of security. And at the same time, it's important for Yaakov to understand that he is stooping. Not stooping all the way to Lavan's level, but in that direction. There is a spiritual cost to making that choice in the moment, and a risk for the future of getting used to it and acting differently and affecting people because of it. Much of Jewish ethics is a virtue ethics, where our ability to act well has to be built and then replenished continually by repeated actions. When we do something we know is just all right but not honorable, we set up an obstacle for ourselves. Yaakov already has too much experience in his prior life being comfortable with deceit, and indeed some of his own children will learn badly from his example. I have not quoted much from the Talmudic commentaries on Yaakov and Lavan, or other sources that ask the same question outside of that context. But at least on this story from the Torah, there is a sense in the tradition from some interpreters that someone in Yaakov's situation has a defense for stooping the way he did, but one ought to still recognize that it is stooping and take more steps than Yaakov did to prevent yourself from making such stooping into a habit, much less something you are proud of.